You're watching the History Fella channel, and in this video we're looking at the first siege of Lexington. The siege of Lexington was a minor conflict of the American Civil War. The siege took place from September the 13th to the 20th, 1861, between the Union Army and the pro-Confederate Missouri State Guard in Lexington, county seat of Lafayette County, Missouri. The victory won by the Missouri Guard bolstered the considerable Southern sentiment in the area and briefly consolidated Missouri State Guard control of the Missouri River Valley in the western part of the state. Price and his army, now numbering 15,000 men, arrived before Lexington on September the 11th, 1861. Skirmishing began the morning of September the 12th when two Federal companies, posted behind hemp shocks along a hill, opposed Price's cavalry advance. Price pulled back several miles to Garrison Creek to await his artillery and infantry. With their arrival in the afternoon, he resumed the advance along a more westerly course, eventually intercepting the Independence Road. Mulligan dispatched 4 companies of the 13th Missouri Infantry and the 2 companies of Van Horn's United States Reserve Battalion to oppose his movement. They battled Price's advance elements among the tombstones in Machpelah Cemetery south of town, hoping to buy time for the rest of Mulligan's men to complete his defensive preparations. Price's artillery deployed, and together with his growing infantry contingent, dislodged the defenders and forced them back to their fortifications. Pursuing the fleeing Federals, Price deployed Guber and Bledsoe's batteries to shell the Federal fortifications at the college. 3 Federal artillery pieces replied, destroying one of Guber's caissations near the end of the exchange. The 2.5-hour artillery duel badly diminished the State Guard's ammunition, and much of Price's ordnance supply train had been left at Acelia. This development, combined with the redoubtable nature of the Union fortifications, to render any further assaults impractical. The Federals remained entrapped in their fortress, however, surrounded by an army nearly 5 times their size. Having bottled up this enemy, Price decided to wait on his own ammunition wagons. Other supplies and reinforcements were renewing the assault. "It was unnecessary to kill off the boys here," said he. "Patience will give us what we want." Accordingly, he ordered his infantry to fall back to the county fairgrounds. On September the 18th, Price had determined the time had come. The State Guard advanced under heavier Union artillery fire, pushing the enemy back into the inner works. Price's cannon responded to Mulligan's with 9 hours of bombardment, utilizing heated shots in an attempt to set fire to the Masonic College and other Federal positions. Mulligan stationed a youth in the attic of the college's main building, who was able to remove all incoming rounds before they could set the building ablaze. Once described by a local newspaper as the largest and best arranged dwelling house west of St. Louis, the Anderson House was a 3-story Greek Revival style house constructed by Oliver Anderson, a prominent Lexington manufacturer. Sometime around July 1861, the Anderson family were evicted from their home, which lay adjacent to Colonel Mulligan's fortifications, and a Union hospital was established here. At the start of the battle, over 100 sick or wounded Union soldiers occupied this structure, with their medical care entrusted to a surgeon named Dr. Cooley, while Father Butler, chaplain of the 23rd Illinois, provided for their spiritual needs. Because of its tactical significance, lying as only a few yards from the State Guard positions, General Thomas Harris ordered soldiers from his 2nd Division to capture the house on September the 18th. Shocked at what he considered a violation of the laws of war, Colonel Mulligan ordered the structure to be retaken. Company B, 23rd Illinois, Company B, 13th Missouri, and volunteers from the 1st Illinois Cavalry charged from the Union lines and recaptured the house, suffering heavy casualties in the process. Harris's troops recaptured the hospital later that day, and it remained in State Guard hands thereafter. During the Federal assault on the Anderson house, Union troops summarily executed 3 State Guard soldiers at the base of the grand staircase in the main hall. The Southerners claimed the men had already surrendered and should have been treated as prisoners of war. The Federal troops who had sustained numerous casualties in retaking the residence considered the prisoners to have been in violation of the laws of war for having attacked the hospital in the first place. The Anderson home was heavily damaged by cannon and rifle projectiles, with many of the holes still visible both inside and outside the house, which is also now a museum today. The Anderson House and Lexington battlefield was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1961. On September the 19th, the State Guard consolidated its positions, kept the Federals under heavy artillery fire, and prepared for their final attack. One problem faced by the defenders was a chronic lack of water. Wells within the Union lines had gone dry, and State Guard sharpshooters were able to cover a nearby spring, picking off any man who tried to approach it. Surmising that a woman might succeed where his men had failed, Mulligan sent a female to the spring. Price's troops held their fire and even permitted us to take a few canteens of water back to the beleaguered Federals. This tiny gesture, however, could not solve the increasing crisis of thirst among the Union garrison, which would contribute to their ultimate undoing. General Price had established his headquarters in a bank building at 926 Main Street on September the 18th, 1861. Located across the street from the Lafayette County Courthouse, directing State Guard operations from a room on the 2nd floor. On the 20th, a cannonball, probably fired from Captain Hiram Bledsoe's State Guard battery, struck the courthouse, only about 100 yards from the General Price's headquarters. According to accounts dating from 1920, the ball did not originally lodge in the column, but fell out and was recovered by a collector. Decades after the battle, the then elderly gentleman signed an affidavit with his story, then gave the cannonball to county commissioners. They in turn had the ball screwed onto a 2-foot iron rod embedded into the column for the purpose, where it remains visible to tourists today. On the evening of September the 19th, soldiers of the Brigadier General Thomas A. Harris's 2nd Division, State Guard, began using hemp bales seized from nearby warehouses to construct a movable breastwork facing the Union entrenchment. These bales were soaked in river water overnight to render them impervious to any heated rounds fired from the Federal guns. Harrison's plan was for the troops to roll the bales up the hill the following day, using them for cover as they advanced close enough to the Union garrison for a final charge. The hemp bale line started in the vicinity of the Anderson house, extending north along the hillside for about 200 yards. In many places, the hemp bales were stacked too high to provide additional protection. Early on the morning of September the 20th, Harris's men advanced behind his mobile breastworks. As the fighting progressed, State Guardsmen from other divisions joined Harris's men behind them, increasing the amount of fire directed towards the Union garrison. Although the defenders poured red-hot shot into the advancing bales, Their soaking in the Missouri River the previous night had given the hemp the desired immunity to the federal shells. By early afternoon, the rolling fortifications had advanced close enough for the Southerners to take the Union works in a final rush. Mulligan was requested to surrender. An afternoon, and at 2 p.m., his men vacated their trenches and stacked their arms. Many years later, in his book The Rise and Fall of the Confederate Government, Southern President Jefferson Davis wrote that the expedient of the bales and the hemp was a brilliant conception, not unlike that which made Tariq and Saracen warrior immortal, and gave his name to the northern pillar of Hercules. Casualties at Lexington were relatively low, because the battle was largely fought from protected positions. Price claimed a loss of only 25 men killed and 72 wounded in his official report. However, a study of his overall subordinates after-action reports revealed a total of at least 30 killed and 120 wounded. This would not include any civilians or recruits who had not yet enrolled, but who had joined the fighting. The Federals lost 39 killed and 120 wounded. The relatively light casualties may be attributed to Mulligan's excellent entrenchments and Harris's hemp bale inspiration. Nevertheless, entire Union garrison was taken prisoner. Among the casualties at the First Battle of Lexington was Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin W. Grover, commanding of the 27th Missouri Mounted Infantry, who was wounded by a musket ball in the thigh. He succumbed to his wound on October the 31st, 1861. The surrendered Union soldiers were compelled to listen to a speech by the deposed pro-Confederate Missouri governor, Claiborne F. Jackson, who upbraided them for entering his state without invitation and waging war upon its citizens. The Federals were then paroled by General Price, with the notable exception of Colonel Mulligan, who refused parole. Price was reportedly so impressed by the Federal commander's demeanor and conduct during and after the battle that he offered Mulligan his own horse and buggy, and ordered them safely escorted to Union lines. Mulligan was mortally wounded at the Second Battle of Kernston, near Winchester, Virginia, on July the 24th, 1864. While Price would go on to command Confederate forces at numerous battles throughout the Western and Trans-Mississippi theaters. Following the surrender at Lexington, Fremont and Price negotiated an exchange cartel. The Camp Jackson parolees were exchanged for a portion of Mulligan's command. This worked smoothly for the officers who were specifically named, but not for the Federal enlisted men. Some enlisted men were ordered back into Federal service without having been properly exchanged, then moved to different theaters. Several were captured at Shiloh, where they were recognized and executed for violating their parole. If you found the information in this video informative, please feel free to like the video and consider subscribing to the channel.